Deaths in Glenmorach Manor, a fiction novel. Written by Shirley, read by Sir Lawrence Olivier. This audiobook was narrated using synthetic voice technology provided by 11 Labs. Chapter 7. It's been more than 2 weeks since Benjamin's rejection, and Rosy started losing hope. One morning, Rosy wandered around Glenmorach Manor, feeling an unfamiliar heaviness pressing down on her. The cheerful vibe she usually carried was nowhere to be found, replaced by a dull, dragging sadness she just couldn't shake. Even the gardens, which normally felt like a comforting escape, looked lifeless and uninspiring. She had grown quieter, her smile had become rare, and her usual energy seemed to have vanished. The grand halls of the manor, once welcoming, now felt cold and uninviting, almost as if they reflected her mood. Lord Wallace, always quick to notice the slightest changes, didn't miss the shift in Rosy. His keen eye had a knack for picking up on the emotions of those around him, and he never hesitated to step in when needed. That morning, as Rosy stepped into the library looking pale and worn out, Lord Wallace put his newspaper down and fixed her with a concerned look. "Rosy, are you all right? You look pale. You're not yourself today," Lord Wallace asked, his tone gentle yet filled with genuine concern. Rosy managed a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not feeling very well, my lord, but I'm sure it's nothing serious. I can still manage my duties," she said softly, not meeting his gaze. Lord Wallace raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Rubbish. You seem like you're carrying a lot on your shoulders right now. Perhaps some fresh air and sunshine will do you good. How about we visit the vineyard today? It will be a pleasant change of scenery for both of us." Rosy hesitated for a moment, feeling a little embarrassed by her own mood. But something in Lord Wallace's tone, his kindness, made her nod in agreement. "That sounds nice, my lord. I would like that," she said, her voice soft but with a flicker of hope. Lord Wallace gave her a warm smile. "Excellent. Let's get ready then. A little time among the vines should help lift your spirits." He called for Mr. Morrison to fetch the driver and prepare the car. Even though the vineyard was not that far from the manor, with Lord Wallace's condition, a car ride would be a lot easier. Lord Wallace was determined to get out of the manor and visit the vineyard, where Robert, Anthony, and the workers were busy with the day's tasks. As the car rolled up to the vineyard, the familiar sight of the rows of grapevines stretching out under the bright sky lifted Rosy's spirits slightly. She could already feel the fresh air working its magic on her, easing the weight that had settled in her chest. Lord Wallace's determination to make her feel better was touching, and she appreciated the gesture more than she could express. As they arrived at the vineyard, Anthony, Lord Wallace's young nephew, was waiting near the entrance to help Lord Wallace from the car. With careful hands, he helped his uncle settle in his wheelchair, making sure he was comfortable. "Everything going well, Anthony?" Lord Wallace asked, surveying the vineyard with a keen eye. "Quite well, Uncle. The vines are thriving this year. The workers are keeping up with the harvest, and Robert has been overseeing everything as usual. There's a good spirit among the men," Anthony replied with a smile, adjusting his position slightly. "That's good to hear," Lord Wallace said, his gaze scanning the workers hard at work. "How's Robert? I haven't had a proper word with him in a while," Anthony said, his face lighting up. "I'll fetch him for you. He'll be pleased to see you." Lord Wallace smiled and nodded, watching as Anthony hurried off to find his cousin. Rosy stood beside him, her eyes taking in the sprawling fields of green and the bustle of activity around them. For the first time in days, she felt a spark of comfort, the quiet beauty of the vineyard, beginning to heal the ache in her heart. Soon enough, Anthony returned with Robert, who quickly made his way over to greet his father. Robert's face brightened as he approached, His steps quickened when he saw Lord Wallace. "Papa, it's good to see you here. How have you been?" Robert said, his voice warm. He approached his father and hugged him. "I'm well, Robert. I've just been meaning to check in on how everything's going here. How's the harvest shaping up? Any issues with the workers?" Lord Wallace replied. Robert smiled confidently. "No problems, Papa. The workers are in good spirits, and we're ahead of schedule for this time of year. I've been keeping a close eye on everything." Lord Wallace nodded approvingly. "That's good to hear. It's always a relief to see things running smoothly. I trust you're managing everything well," Robert said, glancing over at the workers who were hard at work in the distance. "I'm keeping things well managed and organized, as you'd expect." Rosy, watching the exchange between father and son, felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in days. She felt lucky to be surrounded by such care and attention to detail, and it was in these moments that she began to feel like herself again, even if just for a short while. As Rosy stood beside Lord Wallace, she felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the light breeze rustling through the leaves of the vineyard. But her mind was elsewhere. She was no longer listening to the conversation between Robert and his father. Her thoughts had drifted to something she hadn't expected, something that caught her by surprise. She had always known Robert as a quiet and reserved man, but now, watching him as he spoke with Lord Wallace, she started to notice things she hadn't before. Robert was different from Benjamin. So different, in fact, that it made her heart ache with a strange, unfamiliar longing. His deep, steady voice seemed to resonate with authority, yet there was something gentle in the way he spoke. His words, though few, were measured and thoughtful. He wasn't a man who needed to fill every silence, unlike Benjamin, whose constant chatter had often left her feeling overstimulated. Robert's calm nature was like a breath of fresh air, but it was his physical attractiveness that made her heart skip a beat. Rosy's gaze lingered on his muscular hands. His fingers were strong, each movement precise and purposeful, as he gestured while speaking. The sight of those hands, so capable and confident, made her chest tighten. She could almost feel the strength of them. Imagined what it would be like if they wrapped around her, holding her tightly, protecting her from the ache she now felt deep inside. She shook her head, trying to rid herself of the thought, but the image remained. Why did she never notice how extremely attractive he was? Robert's glowing brown skin, kissed by the sun, made him look almost unreal. There was something undeniably masculine about him, something that pulled her in like a current she couldn't escape. She noticed the way the sunlight hit the muscles of his arms, glistening with a fine layer of sweat that made his skin seem to shimmer. Her eyes followed the beads of sweat as they dripped down his forehead, his brown hair damp and clinging to his brow. The sweat glistened on his skin, catching the light in a way that made him seem even more captivating. Rosy found herself breathless, as if the very air had become dense around her. She tried to focus on the conversation again, but her mind was somewhere else. She talked to herself. What's wrong with me? Her heart raced as she tried to shake off the images filling her mind, of Robert's arms wrapping around her, holding her from behind, strong and protective. She could almost feel the warmth of his body against hers, the steady rhythm of his breath as he held her close. She longed for that sense of security, a stark contrast to the heartbreak that Benjamin had left in his wake. There was something about the way Robert carried himself that made him incredibly attractive. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized the shift within herself. She had been so focused on Benjamin, thinking he was the one who could make her happy. But now she was seeing Robert in a completely different light. She watched him talk to Lord Wallace. Then Rosy felt butterflies in her stomach. Her heart skipped a beat, and she realized with a start that she was drawn to Robert in a way she hadn't expected. She had never really acquainted herself with him before. He had always been the quiet figure, but now she was seeing him, truly seeing him for the first time. The way he spoke, the way he held himself, the way he worked tirelessly in the fields. It was all so manly. The ache from Benjamin's rejection began to fade, replaced by an unfamiliar but welcome warmth. The more she watched Robert, the more she realized that he might just be the one who could offer her the comfort and protection she so desperately needed. For a moment, wishful thinking mixed with new plans played around in Rosy's mind, swirling like a warm breeze on a summer afternoon. In her heart, she whispered to herself that it was time to build a new plan, a new chapter. Rosy began to smile, a smile that only she knew what it meant. It was a smile that acknowledged something had shifted, something had changed, and this time, no more mistakes. Part 2. In the still hours when the manor was quiet, Rosy's thoughts often wandered to Robert, the second son of Lord Wallace, who held her attention like no one else. She knew Robert, though a man of few words, had a presence that could not be ignored. Reserved, distant, and often buried in his work. Today she was ready to execute her first plan. The mailman, a small, wiry man, arrived at precisely the same time every day, his knapsack bulging with letters for the Wallace family. The mailman, a small,
But it was always
wiry
Mr.
man,
Morrison
arrived
who
at
received
precisely
the
same
daily
time
incoming
every day.
letters.
His knapsack
Rosy
bulging
had
with
never
letters
been
for the
one
Wallace
to act
family.
impulsively,
But it was always
but today
Mr.
was
Morrison
different.
who received the daily
Today
incoming letters.
she would intercept the letters
Rosy
herself,
had never been one to act
particularly
impulsively.
one she knew
But
was
today was
addressed to
different.
Lord Wallace.
Today
She would intercept
to
the letters
approach Robert
herself,
later.
particularly one
As
she
the
knew
mailman
was addressed
approached,
to Lord Wallace.
Rosy was already
would be
waiting
the
by the
perfect
door.
excuse to approach
She was
Robert
poised,
later.
graceful, and ready. Before Mr. Morrison could make his usual appearance, she stepped forward and took the bundle of letters from the mailman's hands, offering a polite but quick smile in exchange. "Thank you," she said calmly to the mailman. She carefully slipped one important letter addressed to Lord Wallace into her pocket, then went to meet Mr. Morrison to give the rest of the correspondence to be distributed as usual. That evening, when Lord Wallace had already gone to sleep, Rosy saw her opportunity. She dressed in a distinctly feminine manner. Her off-shoulder dress showcased her beautiful shoulders and collarbone, making her look sexy yet sophisticated. She also lifted her hair to reveal her long, beautiful neck. She lightly wore her favorite perfume and applied her thin makeup in a very natural way. She did not want to appear seductive. No, not this time. She believed she must earn Robert's respect rather than appearing as if she was trying too hard. When she was ready, she moved quickly. She didn't forget to bring the letter and hide it in her pocket. She was making her way down the long corridors to Robert's study. The door creaked slightly as she pushed it open, the scent of old wood and leather books wrapping around her. Robert was seated at his desk, scribbling away at some paperwork. Perfect, Rosy thought to herself. She knocked gently on the door. "Mr. Robert?" He looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers with a kind of distracted curiosity. "Rosy, do you need anything?" "I believe so," she replied with a smile that was both warm and confident. "I was assigned by your father to ask if there's a letter for Lord Wallace among your pile. Just wondering if it has arrived today, or if Mr. Morrison has misplaced it." Robert's brow furrowed slightly. "I haven't checked them all, no. Do you want to check yourself?" He motioned to the stack of letters on his desk, still focused on the papers before him. "If I may, sir," said Rosy. "Please do," Robert answered. Rosy was undeterred. She approached the desk, her eyes never leaving his for too long. She could feel the warmth of his gaze, even if it wasn't fully focused on her. She reached for the pile of letters, but as she did, she made sure to knock them over, sending them scattering across the floor. "Oh, silly me," she exclaimed, dropping to her knees to gather the letters. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Robert." Her hands brushed against the cool surface of the wood as she collected the papers. "It's all good," Robert responded to her as he began to help her pick up the letters scattered on the floor. Rosy was aware of Robert's presence behind her, moving to help. She could feel his breath behind her ear. His fingers brushed against hers as they both reached for the same letter. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Rosy turned her head and their eyes met. They were both staring deeper at each other's eyes for seconds, as if they've just lost. Robert sighed deeply, enjoying a romantic body scent close to him. Rosy really smelled so good that night with the perfect amount of perfume. Her outfit truly accentuated her beautiful shoulders, collarbones, and down to her gorgeous chest. Rosy noticed that for a brief moment, Robert's gaze shifted to her neck and her chest. She looked very inviting, but in an elegant and sophisticated way. As though he had just woken from a dream, Robert just realized how beautiful Rosy was, and his desire as a man began to awaken. For the first time, Robert seemed to really see her, not as a caregiver, but as a woman. His gaze lingered, his lips parting slightly as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Rosy, too, was struck by the sudden intensity of the moment, the way he looked at her, the slight curve of his lips, the hesitation that hung in the air. She could feel the heat between them, and her pulse quickened. She had always known Robert to be quiet, stoic even, but now she saw something different in his eyes, something that made her feel powerful, yet vulnerable at the same time. "Thank you for the letter, Mr. Robert." Rosy broke the silence. She stood, smoothing the front of her dress as she did. "I should put this on Lord Wallace's desk and go back to my room now." Robert blinked, as if coming out of a trance. His voice was quieter than before. "Of course, no problem." He didn't seem to know what else to say. Rosy smiled and nodded softly, her heart fluttering. "I'm sorry for interrupting your work. Good night, Mr. Robert." "Good night, Rosy," he answered while remaining astonished, gazing at her. Oh, heaven! Was that a smile? Rosy's heart soared with a triumphant scream of joy. She caught Robert smiling a little before he was back focusing on his work, as if he didn't want Rosy to see him smile, but she did. She turned and left the room, her mind racing. She had done it. She had successfully planted herself in Robert's thoughts, and he had smiled, something she or anybody else had ever seen before. She knew that this was just the beginning, but in that moment, she couldn't help but feel a small sense of victory. That night, as Rosy lay in bed, she couldn't help but replay the encounter over and over in her mind. The way he had looked at her, the way she had made him notice her, not just as a caregiver, but as a woman. Her plan was in motion now, and she knew the next steps would be just as important as the first. But for now, she allowed herself a smile. It had been a good night. Several days had passed, and Rosy had been trying to get Robert's attention. However, since Robert spent most of his time in the vineyard, Rosy had few opportunities to get close to him. Moreover, Robert was very quiet and tended to be reserved, but Rosy knew for certain that deep down, he was a kind-hearted man. This was the opportunity Rosy needed to win his heart, and she hoped that someday his attention would turn into love. Rosy's heart raced with anticipation. She had carefully planned this moment. She knew that Robert, though often distant and absorbed in his work, was a man with a deep sense of compassion. Tonight, she would need to make him feel something more for her, something real. As the night went on, the mansion stayed silent, with only the faint sound of the wind rustling outside. Earlier that day, Rosy had composed a letter for herself, one that would pull on the strings of Robert's heart. She had written a tale of sorrow and heartache, pretending it was from her father, who she claimed had fallen gravely ill in Newcastle, England. The truth was far from this. Her father had abandoned his own family when she was just a little girl, never to be heard from again. But tonight, Rosy needed Robert to see her as a woman who had endured hardship, someone worthy of his empathy. The hours passed, and when Lord Wallace had retired for the night, Rosy knew it was time. She carefully folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket, moving quietly through the house. She made her way toward the stairs. She had seen Robert in his study earlier, buried in his paperwork. He often worked late into the night, and Rosy knew he would pass this corridor to be on his way to his room soon. This was her chance. She sat down on the first step of the grand staircase, her body facing the shadows of the corridor. Then she began to cry, softly at first, then louder, allowing the tears to flow freely. She needed him to hear her, to feel compelled to approach. Sure enough, after a few moments, she heard footsteps approaching. Rosy didn't try to wipe her tears. She kept her head lowered, pretending to be lost in her sorrow. "Rosy, what happened to you? Why are you crying?" came Robert's voice, concerned yet gentle. Rosy looked up, her eyes wide and tear-streaked. She sniffled softly before speaking in a tremulous voice, as if struggling to hold herself together. She began, her words carefully measured. "My father, he's very ill. I received a letter from him today. He's asking for me to come. He asked if he's still got a chance to apologize to me, but I can't. I don't even know if I should." Robert knelt down beside her, his face soft with worry. "I'm so sorry, Rosy. What's wrong with him? Why does he need to apologize to you?" She hesitated, then continued with the tale she had created, her voice wavering with grief. "I never really knew my father, Mr. Robert. He left our family when I was just a little girl. I was only 7. And after that, he never came back. My mother, she tried to keep things together, but we were never the same. I grew up with this hole inside of me, this emptiness that I never could fill." She paused, letting the words hang in the air before continuing. "I didn't even realize how much I longed for his approval until now. And now that he's so ill, I don't know what to feel. I don't know if I should feel guilty for not having cared about him all these years, or if it's too late to fix things." Robert listened intently, his eyes filled with compassion. His hand hovered near her shoulder, but he didn't touch her just yet. His voice was low and sincere when he spoke. "I understand. It must be so hard living with that uncertainty all these years. And now to have him reach out, it's a lot to take in." Rosy nodded. Her throat was tight with emotion. "I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should go to him or if I'm just fooling myself, hoping for something that will never be there." Robert's hand found her shoulder, and he gently squeezed it, offering silent support. "It's okay to feel conflicted, Rosy. You're only human. Sometimes we hold on to things we don't understand, hoping for some kind of closure. But it's not always easy to get." Rosy's heart swelled with gratitude for his compassion. She leaned slightly toward him, needing the comfort of his presence. Robert, sensing her vulnerability, moved closer, pulling her into his arms without a second thought. His embrace was warm and steady, and Rosy felt the weight of hers aurow begins to lift, just for a moment. Robert gently placed his hand on Rosy's head and rested it against his shoulder. As she rested her head on his shoulder, she spoke softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Mr. Robert. I don't know why I'm telling you all of this, but it feels better somehow not to carry this burden alone." Robert continued to hold her, his hand gently stroking her back as he spoke. "You don't have to carry it alone, Rosy. You've been through so much, but you're not alone here. You have people who care about you." Rosy stayed there for a while, nestled in his embrace, the weight of her fake story forgotten for a moment, as she felt the warmth of his support. She had gotten what she needed, his empathy, his care. But as she leaned further into him, she realized something she hadn't expected. It wasn't just the sympathy she craved anymore. She had found something deeper in Robert's presence, a connection that was slowly beginning to feel real. As the minutes passed, Rosy pulled away slightly, looking up at Robert with soft and grateful eyes. "Thank you. You have been so kind, even to a servant like me." Robert smiled gently, his hands still on her shoulders. "A servant? What do you mean?" "You are not a servant. In my eyes, you are a very sweet girl. Although I do not differentiate between a servant and others. All human beings are the same, regardless of their status. You do not have to thank me." Rosy felt a flutter in her chest as she returned his smile, her heart racing as he looked into her eyes. For a moment, everything seemed still. The world outside the walls of the manor disappearing into the background as they sat there, the bond between them silently growing. With a final glance at Robert, Rosy lowered her head and pressed it lightly against his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat. It was steady, comforting, and real. He embraced her even more firmly, slowly caressing her hair, and without realizing it, Robert landed a kiss gently on her forehead. That night, under the dim candlelight, Rosy felt an overwhelming peace in Robert's warm embrace. Finally, she felt those masculine arms protecting her with affection. This is the moment she had been dreaming of since Robert caught her attention in the vineyard a week ago. Rosy lifted her head and gazed at Robert's face. His eyes fell upon her beautiful face, illuminated by candlelight. Despite the sadness radiating from her ocean-blue, teary eyes, she looked stunningly beautiful. Robert examined her soft and wet lips. It seemed like she was hypnotizing him to swiftly insert his lips into hers. Suddenly, they found themselves brushing each other's lips, so deeply, so tenderly. Rosy felt the jolt all over her body. She had found her true Prince Charming, the one she had been dreaming of for all this time. From that night, they began to fall in love. This time, her love for Robert was reciprocated. Her dream to become a part of the Wallace family was closer than just a daydream. Robert had indeed been captivated. Whenever they had the opportunity to meet secretly, they released their longing for each other. Every night had become their special moment. They embraced each other's love. They believed everybody was asleep, but the thing was, someone had been secretly observing their intimacy each night from a distance.